Good afternoon to our viewers in Germany and good morning to our viewers in the United States. Hello, I'm Steve Sokol and I'm the president of the American Council on Germany, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for this special edition of our Kaffeepause series, just a few days after the German federal election on Sunday, February 23rd. And I'm delighted to welcome two guests today. We have Klaus-Dieter Frankenberger, who is the former foreign editor of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, and he is joining us from just outside of Frankfurt. Klaus-Dieter, herzlich willkommen. It's great to see you.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's a pleasure to be with you and Nadine on this program.
And I'm delighted to welcome Nadine Lindner. She's a correspondent of Deutschlandradio based in Berlin, but has been covering Eastern Germany and the alternative for Germany, among other topics. And so I am sure that that is something that we will talk about today. Nadine, herzlich willkommen.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, I'm very happy to see you both, and I want to thank you both for taking the time to talk to us. It was a very short election campaign season, given how early the election was. And the dust now from Sunday's elections is sort of settling as people digest the results of the election. I thought it was interesting to see that in the end, the polls in the run-up to the election were pretty accurate. There were, some deviations, of course, and we can talk a little bit about that. But the polling was pretty accurate. I thought we could maybe start by talking about what surprised each of you by Sunday's election results. Nadine, do you want to start by sharing some of the sort of high-level surprises or things that you didn't expect?
Well, I think I had like two surprises during that evening. I was surprised by the high voter turnout, which was over 80%, which is in comparison to the years before really high. And I think that explains also my second surprise of the evening, that the AfD, in contrast to some of the polls that we saw before, or some of the surveys that we saw before, was not as strong as expected. It was only 20.8%, which is still double of what the AfD got in the 2021 election, but still it was not as high as 22-23%, which was seen in the surveys before. We can talk about the reasons. Well, we lost two parties in the parliament. The Liberals are not part of the parliament anymore. The FDP, sorry, and also the party of Sarah Wagenknecht is not part of the parliament anymore, which was really close. It was only 13,000 votes, which shows that every vote matters, and sometimes it's just not enough to be part of the parliament anymore.
I mean, I think some people have asked questions about whether democracy in Germany is working, but the fact that there was such a high voter participation, I think, is a good sign that democracy is working, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. Klaus-Dieter, what surprised you by the election results?
Well, the surprising was, of course, the showing of the Linke, the rebirth, the escape from the ashes, and the death zone of politics. This was a remarkable comeback for a party that has gone through bitter moments, almost being extinct, certainly in the west of the country, and now with new leadership, finally getting rid of Sarah Wagenknecht. The big spoiler of all the parties he has ever been associated with is over. This was a surprise. 8.8% is remarkable. And the new influx of new and young members, particularly women, is also something that needs to be looked at. And other than that, I would say there are some peculiarities with this election. High voter turnout, already mentioned. The reformed voting system has, as expected, produced negative and bad results. So many candidates who had allegedly, or at first glance, made it to Berlin, to the Bundestag, will not serve because of the new voting system. The sweeping victory of the AfD in the Eastern Länder is a remarkable thing. I mean, we get a sort of our AfDization in the East looked at from the West. A colleague of mine just said the other day, are the revenge of the East. I mean, in their districts where the AfD got 50%, almost Bavarian or condition, so to speak. And the voters flatly rejected the Ampel, kicked the rascals out. Bad, period. Go to hell. Or that, and we will also speak about the fortunes of the CDU, the likely new chancellor party. Not too well, actually. It didn't do too well. Or it's a meager result. It's the second worst result in the history of the party, and this at a time when the animosity towards the Ampel parties were as strong as the animosity there can be. It's some of the things which the party will have to look at, and maybe we also will pay more attention to in the next half hour or so.
Absolutely. And Nadine, it looked like you just wanted to say something directly to that as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. The Ampel parties, the Social Democrats, the Greens, and also the Liberals, they lost more or less like 18% in total, and the CDU could only collect like 4% of this. So this is also one point where you can really see how weak that victory of Friedrich Merz is.
So you've both put a number of topics out there, and I'd like to pick up on some of these threads. But since we're talking about the CDU, it seems to me like not as much is being made of what a weak win this was, right? They came in with 28.5% of the vote. I think in the polls, they had been at 30, maybe as much as 32% of the vote. So they fell short of where the polling numbers had been. And they certainly fell short of the 35% that Friedrich Merz was hoping for when he talked about this really being a Volkspartei or a people party, a people's party, a catch-all party. 28.5% is a far cry from where the Christian Democrats were in their heyday. How do you both sort of explain this sort of mediocre win for the Christian Democrats?
Well, my reading is maybe 2 points. One is Friedrich Merz has never been a popular candidate with the majority of the electorate. Never been. His personality, old-schooled, old West Germany type of politician. But he did he did well in parts of the country. He does not do well, and he did not do well with Merkel women voters, and he has not recovered any territory from that. And then he did, in my judgment, a mistake. I disagree strongly with my colleagues in the FAZ who said the risk in the vote in the Bundestag at the end of January, when they basically accepted the collaboration in a voting procedure with the AfD, the risk was well taken. I disagreed. And we have seen through the whole campaign, as you alluded to earlier, polls above 30%, 34. I mean, this was way above the expected upper 30s, but 34 is better than 28. And it went down all the way to 20.5 because his credibility was on the line. And I would think it backfired. This was bad tactics. I don't say the word strategy, but it was bad tactics in my judgment, because the voters who didn't like him in the first place felt their concerns and questions actually vindicated by the maneuver in the Bundestag. 28.5% is, let's be honest, not a good result for Friedrich Merz. In these circumstances where an outgoing administration has seen the worst poll numbers in the history of the country.
Yeah, I think this is one important point that you mentioned, Klaus-Dieter, because when we look at the mobilization of the left, I think this exact point at the end of January was the point where the renaissance of the Linke started, because people were really upset, because maybe we have to give the context, because Friedrich Merz always said, I will never collaborate with the AfD, and whoever from my party who collaborates with the AfD will get a punishment. And now he goes, and he got really nervous after 2 Islamist attacks that we had in Magdeburg. Well, Magdeburg was a bit different, but it was still like an attack on a Christmas market. Then we had an Islamist attack on Aschaffenburg, on the kindergarten group in a park, which was really gruesome. And then we had an attack in Munich where a driver drove a car into some union demonstration, some union march. So that really shook the country, and a lot of people were really feeling insecurity due to these events. And then Friedrich Merz got nervous, especially after the attack of Aschaffenburg, and he had the feeling he has to do something. And then the problem is he got so nervous that he kind of threw away his own principles of not collaborating with the AfD. And I think for him it was a real problem, because I think he lost a lot of credibility. And also it didn't really pay back well for him, because people didn't trust him. So I think what happened was that people were really angry with him. They started to vote for the Linke, or not so much for SPD and Grüne, but a lot for the Linke. And maybe also people had the feeling, okay, now it's time to support the AfD, when even Friedrich Merz is taking them out of the...
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the attacks, because that was indeed something the country was flabbergasted, and we were totally terrified by this. A series of events basically are reflected on the history of recent illegal, irregular immigration, and the whole debate about migration. The government is unwilling, unable to handle the situation, or trim the influx and the rest. It was a boon to the AfD, by the way, and he said, because Friedrich Merz felt he needed to do something and to make his position clear that this issue will have to be addressed one way or the other the first day I'm in government, the first day I'm responsible for the political fortunes of this country.
Yeah,
and they did this, and it backfired somewhat.
Yeah. The problem is, I mean, the point is there was like an interesting shift with Friedrich Merz, because first he said, I think it was after Magdeburg, he said, like, day one, when I'm in office, I will change migration politics. It was more or less like a Trump-style move. And then he switched, I think after Aschaffenburg, then he switched to the point where he said, okay, now in parliament, I will follow my own like anti-migration, anti-asylum seekers policy together with the AfD. So it was like a climax, and there I think there he failed in that point. And the problem is also now you can see, okay, well, this is just domestic politics, but on the other hand, it just shows that Friedrich Merz, in moments of like great pressure on him, he might not be stable, but he might lose his nerves and then like act not like rationally, and maybe he doesn't like think enough before he acts and before he speaks. And also one other point that I see very critical in Friedrich Merz is how he intakes information, because sometimes we have seen that he uses like more or less alternative facts about some political actors that he doesn't like. And well, I think he can say, I don't like all your demonstrations against my parties, the CDU. But the way that he framed it was not right.
So, Klaus-Dieter, you were smiling as Nadine was speaking just now and describing some of these character traits of Friedrich Merz. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
As I do know, I have been knowing Friedrich Merz for quite a while. We actually both started our careers with Europe. Me as a young reporter for European affairs, and he as a young member of the European Parliament. So I've been knowing him for decades, literally. And Friedrich Merz is absolutely, that's my personal feeling, absolutely immune towards the hard right collaboration issue. He has nothing to do with these people. But he has a tendency sometimes that he reacts and responds to whatever happens impulsively.
Mm.
And this was the situation when I mean I was with him the very day Aschaffenburg, the incident at Aschaffenburg happened. At the time, we were unaware if this was criminal, just
Mm.
crime, bad
Mm.
enough, or it was just migration related. So this came through the night, and then he thought he has to do something, and he came forced with those forceful statement, and then the things propelled into the
Mhm.
Bundestag. And this is a character trait that may get in his way when he, as you said, when he faces a lack of information, basically, but has to do something. Serious things happened. He has to respond to the provocation of the American president. He has to respond to machinations by by Vladimir Putin. Has to do something here, something there, and then you need you need a leader that navigates the German political ship through rough water in a way when the passengers don't get overboard.
Yeah,
And
and mm,
I have confidence in him, but there's a
mm.
trait that is a little bit dangerous at
Mhm.
times.
Yeah, and not even, sorry, let me just add, and maybe not even navigate only the German ship, but also the
The
EU
European,
as
yeah.
the
Yeah,
biggest nation within Europe.
yeah.
And so we honestly, we have to sort ourselves out and
I,
get back on the
I
scene.
was planning to come to this a little bit later in our conversation, but since we're here, I'll maybe bring in some of the other themes about the other parties in just a moment. I mean, it looks like there will be a coalition between the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats. There's not really another alternative. Those negotiations are, in the very early phases, as the different parties do their Sondierungsgespräche. And I would be interested in hearing from both of you how you think a Chancellor Friedrich Merz will keep sort of all of the factions within these two parties under one roof, where you see some alliances forming. I mean, I think it will be relatively easy for the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats to develop a common policy or a common position on foreign policy and on some of the security issues ahead. I think it's going to be much more difficult on domestic issues. And here we've started to talk about migration and public safety as key topics for the voters. But of course, the state of the German economy is another one. The discussion about the Schuldenbremse or the debt brake is obviously going to come up. And I think that the top issue for the new coalition is going to be coming to agreement on a budget for the country for 2025. These are going to be very difficult negotiations in the coming weeks for Friedrich Merz and his colleagues within the CDU. How do you see these coalition negotiations going?
Well, I would, if I may start, you described the situation perfectly well, and there's also probably on the SPD part as a level of bitterness against Friedrich Merz, having to do with with these 2 days in the Bundestag at the end of January. Friedrich Merz has already toned down his rhetoric, mostly. In Munich, the day before the election, he said something, he threw red meat to the audience again, and the SPD felt upset about it and felt provocated. I think they might, and this may surprise you, Steve, I think they may get along actually well. They may agree, they may have to compromise on the asylum question, they may have to compromise on the economic situation of the country, and they have to rein in the welfare state, period. That's a must. So both are the rank and file SPD members might not be too happy. Many Christian Democratic voters may not be too happy that they don't get us with the asylum or reform as far as they wish for. But we will get there. We will get compromise. Both parties have to recognize the gravity of the situation,
Mm.
how serious it is, domestically, in Europe, and in the transatlantic arena. We are at an inflection point that in my generation are, if I may say so, and Nadine and you, Steve, on the other side of the pond, haven't seen at all. We haven't seen this. This is strange. The economic model of this country, of our country, is on the line. The political model is on the line. The security issue with the United States, history, hopefully not, but maybe yes. And I would think that the leaders now, if they have not completely lost their senses, particularly at the SPD, why do I say particularly? Because the party is now down to 16 point, what is it? 4%. Record low. For the old Social Democrats, that's only almost as being relegated to second division or third division. In politics. This is as bad as it gets. And the East, it's much worse even. It's even worse. So they have to come to terms. I get a little bit animated here because I think that both of them have to agree to an agenda that brings Germany forward, that strengthens the democratic resilience, underscores our European credentials, and then lay the foundation for a kind of, I say maybe too grandiose a term, but an economic rebirth. The times where we could bask in the alleged glory of being the world's export champion, that's over. That's history.
Fueled by cheap Russian gas.
You know?
Being the world export champion fueled by cheap Russian gas. I mean, this is what you mean, Klaus-Dieter. This is like this triangle, the triangle of success that we had in the past. We relied on cheap energy from Russia. We sold our goods or machines to China, and we got protected by the US, like security-wise. And now all these baselines are over, latest since the Ukraine war. And maybe we should have seen this earlier, also the point with the energy relations to Russia, but anyways, it's now over. I mean, I would agree, Klaus-Dieter, that there's like enough common sense within the CDU and the SPD to form a coalition, and they have formed coalitions before. I mean, under Merkel, we had like long years of coalitions between CDU, CSU, and the SPD. But I see some points where it could be a bit difficult. I think in the asylum politics, it's going to be hard for the CDU to cut back like their ultimatums of rejecting asylum seekers at the borders. This is something that they want, and the SPD says, oh, this is going to be difficult due to European laws. They are like different positions. If you ask people like law experts from this, but I think this is one point that the Social Democrats won't do. And on the other hand, I think we have a huge pressure on the budget. Still, we don't have a budget for this year because the outgoing coalition couldn't form one. They even broke over forming the budget. So we have to do this now. And the problem is, we know that we have to put a lot of money into security and defense, even more. And we have to put a lot of money into the welfare state to pay all the rents. And this is going to be a huge problem because I think the SPD will defend the welfare state no matter what. And we have huge, we need a lot of money also in the healthcare system, in the digitalization, also in the infrastructure. If you look at the train system, at the bridges that crumble. So, I mean, there's like everywhere you look, you need money, you need power, and you only have a limited budget because also the tax inflows due to the meager economic situation is not as good as it used to be like in the last years.
So, Nadine, let me maybe pick up on two things that you just said and ask for a response. I guess, one is you mentioned correctly that there have been coalitions between the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats in the past, most notably under Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel sort of took her party, the Christian Democrats, to the left and sucked some of the air away from the Social Democrats. I wonder to what degree, Friedrich Merz will be accommodating in this way, or if he will try to bring the party back to the right, right? That's one sort of segment that's worth unpacking a little bit more. But the other is, you're absolutely right about the incredible number of investments that need to be made to address many of the domestic challenges facing Germany right now. And it starts with, infrastructure investment, and that comes back to spending. So this issue of the next budget, but also the issue of the debt brake and loosening the debt brake. Is that something that is realistic? And is it something that really could be addressed in the very short term while the current parliament is in place, before the new parliament comes in, where it will be even more difficult to get that through?
Yeah,
Well,
it will be.
I would think it's unrealistic to, because the period is so short, to do something constitutionally with the death brake. I think this is out of the order. But nevertheless, I'm amazed how much Friedrich Merz and others were willing to backpedal a little bit on the debt issue. We can set up special funds, defense. This would be more or less the easiest way, a special fund, than maybe for infrastructure. You can get majorities in the Bundestag, even in the new Bundestag. The Greens may agree, or part of the left may agree. Not easy, but doable. Death brake is a much more fundamental thing, and it has been treated by parts of the CDU, by the liberals, the golden shrine. You worship it and don't touch it anymore. It will lead you into a future of glory and happiness. And then even if the infrastructure is rotten and the defense capabilities are worse than in Mozambique or somewhere else. Now this has to be addressed, and I think the parties know that. When I take my optimism a little bit back when I say now, well, the SPD has lost badly. They're taken to the woodsheds, and they have to overcome a period of grief and get over this, and then come to the conclusion. Now, what kind of party do we want to be? Left, center, more catering to blue-collar voters who are more and more are an endangered species with the party, or more catering to the progressives in U.S. parlance, and so forth. That will be difficult. The schisma in the SPD is not easy to repair, if at all, but they have to think about it. I think there are serious people that are willing to address the issues of the voters, the issues where the economic situation, illegal immigration, the war issue, has been important, yes. What are we going to do about it? We need courageous politicians and leaders who take the issues square on. And yes, there may be a time for a little bit of belt tightening. And I don't say this lightly, because we in the country, in Germany, have never been used to this. We have not been used to a kind of belt tightening rhetoric. Have we, Nadine? Have we?
Yes. If you
Blood, sweat, and
think
tears speech?
of Hartz IV, if you think, well, I studied in Eastern Germany in the period when Hartz IV was introduced. This was like 2004, 2005. And I think for the people there to see that they are not protected by the welfare state anymore, but then that they are treated like within 1 or 2 years, even though they worked all their lives, they were treated like someone who never worked before. I think for some people it was really a traumatic period. It was really a traumatic phase, and I think that also was really bad for the Social Democrats, even in the East, and I think they never really recovered from this. So I think it's always a question, it's a bit of perspective from Eastern and Western viewpoint. And I would say, like, one point for the CDU, I think it's extremely important for them. They already started to kind of reinvent themselves as conservatives. They now have a new program, like a new basis program for the whole party, which was adopted last year. I think it's really important also to be conservative, but not to get into those culture war rhetorics. I think they have to draw like very thin line there, because the pressure on the CDU by the AfD will be so huge. They will be the needle in the flesh the whole time. And whatever might look like a compromise, especially in the migration and asylum politics, will be like pinpointed and will be finger pointed by the AfD the whole time. So I think for the CDU, it's going to be really hard to navigate through the SPD on the one side as a coalition partner, and the AfD on the other side, which will be the biggest opposition party in the new Bundestag. So, which means they will have more possibility to express themselves. They will have more speech time. Maybe they will have important
committee chairs,
like the vice president of the parliament. These all will be discussions, and the parliament always rejected the candidates of the AfD for the vice president of the parliament, but I'm not sure if they will do it again. So I'm a bit curious how the whole discussion will end.
Well, this sounds to me like a rock and a hard place then, or a position that Friedrich Merz and his colleagues from the SPD will have to navigate through. I mean, you're absolutely right. And there is indeed a Western perspective and an Eastern perspective on a lot of issues and experiences, how we got through the past. I was just looking up numbers a minute ago, and I was, how well did the CSU in Bavaria, the sister party, do? And actually, they didn't do too well. And they were demonizing and the Greens, beating up all the time on the Greens, to make sure that the free voters don't benefit or don't fish in the pond of populism. Yes, he was successful they were successful, the CSU, at a little bit, but what happened? The AfD we're up to 20%, 19 something. This is very high for a Western state. In my state of Hesse, it's 17. In my district, it was 14, 15%. Bad enough, but that's reality. But almost 20% in Bavaria. This is a big number. So yes, navigate between a rock and a hard place. This will be the challenge.
So, Klaus-Dieter, I think you bring up a very important point, and Nadine, particularly since you covered the AfD, I think it would be wonderful to hear from you a little bit about why you think the AfD is so strong. I mean, we all have obviously seen, the doubling from 10.4 to 20.8 Bundesweit, right, at the federal level. But that does not take into consideration the fact that they were more like at 34% in the Eastern Länder and 17% in the Western Länder. And in many cases, the second strongest party in much of the West as well, the strongest party in much of the East, right? This shows that this is not just an Ostphänomen, right, an Eastern phenomenon. It is a national issue. And as Klaus-Dieter points out, this is key in a state like Bavaria as well. Can you talk a little bit about why you think the AfD has become as strong as it has?
Yeah, I think this is like one point that is important for the 23rd of February. Since that day, the AfD is like a national party. It's not an Eastern German party anymore, because if you look at certain election districts in the West, it was really a close call. In Baden-Württemberg, in some parts of North Rhine-Westphalia, there was only like maybe 1 or 2% between the direct candidates, between the CDU and the AfD, that the AfD was defeated only by 1 or 2%. Well, I think it's a mixture of mobilization. The AfD has now a strong, how can I say, they have a lot of voters that are really dedicated to the AfD and vote for the AfD no matter what kind of scandal the party produces. If you look back to the last year, we had a huge scandal around the European election with like one candidate being accused of, or his close one worker or one trainee, or at least a person who worked for Maximilian Krah, was accused of spying for China. Maximilian Krah was accused, and also one other candidate was accused of maybe taking money from Russia. So there was like a lot of turmoil also within the AfD, but for the voters, it just didn't matter. Also, the radicalization, it just doesn't matter. There's a very interesting poll or survey after the election where the vast majority of AfD voters, it's like 84%, they say the AfD is not a party that is like right-wing. The AfD, for me, the AfD is a party of the political middle. So, and this explains a lot why all those warnings of extremism just don't hold people back from voting the AfD. And I think it was maybe a bit Trump style. Maybe they learned from Le Pen on focusing on aspects like the cost of living. They were promoting huge tax reductions. And I think the mixture of a very restrictive politics against asylum seekers plus the tax reductions, I think this was it. And also the AfD was never, they have never governed somewhere, not like on a national level, not on a regional level, only in one like district of Thuringia they are governing in Sonneberg. But they are just not responsible for the state that we are in now, for the disaster, how they call it. And I think one point is that Alice Weidel, as a candidate to be a chancellor, she was perceived very positive by young women, because young women say, oh, she's a strong woman, she's just saying what she wants, she's a bit like, she has this underdog image, she's not part of the establishment. Plus, they were really they are really campaigning on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all that. So I think it was a mixture. Plus, they had a lot of attention due to Elon Musk, who was really pushing the AfD, who was really supporting the AfD. So maybe like some of those like tech pros, tech affiliates that we also have in Germany might have considered of voting for the AfD. So I think it's a mixture of
I mean, there was also or sorry, go ahead, Klaus-Dieter.
Just add one thing. Nadine is absolutely right in saying mobilization was of the utmost importance. They managed to attract many more voters from the outside, those who had not participated last time, back into the political system. Voters migrated back into the political arena, and most of them voted for the AfD. Same thing what happened in the United States in 2016 with the first Trump administration, when Trump was elected the first time. Second, I would also say this reflects the enormous animosity towards the enormous animosity towards the Ampel, particularly against the Greens, particularly against the FDP, but also against the SPD. And in the Eastern Länder, it's a specialty. A lot of rural areas are have basically been abandoned by the old Volkspartei, the old catch-all parties, particularly the CDU and particularly the SPD. And they left the terrain open for the AfD to thrive and set up their political infrastructure. And that's what happened. Then you get 50% of the vote in certain districts.
Yeah, plus I think it's a huge process, a really like deep driving process of alienation towards the elites, which is not only the political elites, but it's also like media elites. I mean, like the sad truth is, in these areas, nobody is going to buy an FAZ like Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, or people would not listen to Deutschlandfunk, the radio that I work for, because they would say, okay, it's all Lügenpresse. We're only just lying. We're like, we are allies. We're seen that the problems that the media is seen as allies of the politicians.
I always find it interesting in German elections to also look at the Wählerwanderung, right, or where voters move. And there was a recent poll conducted by Infratest DIMAP of the votes by workers, right? And I don't quite know how they define workers, but it makes the comparison between 2021 and this election, and it shows that the AfD is at 38% support among workers. That's up 17%. And the Social Democrats are only at 12%, and that's down 14%, right? So the assumption is that there are a number of workers who have gone from the Social Democrats to the AfD. The Christian Democrats are relatively constant at 22%, just up 2%. But I think, coming back to what we were talking about earlier about the state of the economy and the working class, I think that that's an important factor. In addition to that, somebody just submitted a question asking about the demographics of the AfD voters. We've talked about that a little bit, but Nadine, can you share any insights with us about sort of who the typical AfD voter might be?
I just want to reinforce what you said in terms of the blue collar vote. The blue collar vote has more and more gone away from the Social Democrat. That's not unusual. That's common throughout Europe, and they go to the right. Reasons are both economic and cultural, and it's not a phenomenon that's not known to you, Steve. You know it very well. The United States or someone said after your recent presidential elections, the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class, and that's a phenomenon throughout Europe, and particularly, and now also in Germany, where blue-collar voters abandon the Social Democrats and go directly to the hot right for cultural reasons. I would say mostly for cultural reasons. They don't feel are not being treated adequately, and the immigration issue, of course, that's true. The demographics, as far as I know, it's not what we thought. It's an elderly party. For the elderly party goes with the CDU. People like my age, they vote for the CDU still. The young, in big numbers, if they're female, this election have gone to the left, and if there are males, gone to the right. The AfD seems to be very attractive for young males in certain social milieus, but also attracts voters in every age group with a stronger concentration in the upper 40s and 50s. But the social distinction is, someone said the AfD has become the party of the workers and those out of work at the same time. And this is a phenomenon. It has become a catch-all party. And this is something we have to look at and try to understand. I mean, we are as a media, but also, of course, the politicians who try to hammer out solutions to the problem that the people are concerned about.
Yeah, I think like one thing that really distinguishes AfD voters from the others is their view on their economic situation. The AfD voters by far see their own economic situation worse than the voters of all other parties. And this is one point. Like 39% say I have a bad financial or a bad economic situation, and it's mostly workers or people who are unemployed that vote for the AfD. Also some of those self-employed freelancers, and then also people with like white-collar jobs. You see, well, like the biggest bump you see in the point between like 25 up to like 44. So you see people in the middle of their lives when they really have economic restraints because they try to feed a family, they try to fund, they try to have a family. Also, the housing market is extremely tight in Germany. To find like a 4-room apartment in one of those biggest cities in Germany, I would say it's close to impossible if you have a low or a middle income and your family doesn't own houses or so. So it's really hard, and everybody is feeling this. And also that tightness on the housing market is like one of the igniting spots for those for those debates that there's not enough for everybody and that we have to kick out like the migrants and the asylum seekers, so we have like flats for everybody else. So I think this is like the perception that there is not enough for everybody, plus the perception that the state is not really working well, especially if you look at the education and also the health system. These are like the doors, or these are the cracks where the AfD propaganda or the AfD program can like trickle into people's minds.
Mm-hmm. Nadine, I have one more sort of follow-up question about the AfD. I mean, obviously there's this firewall, the Brandmauer, that we've talked a little bit about, and Klaus-Dieter was talking about how Friedrich Merz was sort of crossing that line. The major parties have basically said that they would not work with the AfD. Given the rise of the AfD, do those parties run the risk of losing their voters even more than they already have by not working with the AfD moving forward?
Well, the parties have to deliver. The government has to deliver on issues that mean something to the voters. Voters are concerned about. I would just want to remind our viewers that more than 80% of the German voters went into this election being pessimistic about the future. Now, this is an almost unheard number. You would always say, well, 40% disagree with this. And they are pessimistic about the state of affairs. They are pessimistic about the future economic situation of the country. They are pessimistic with the democracy. They are pessimistic with a lot of things, and then they come up with an election results that doesn't make it very much easier to hammer out a coherent agenda and address the issues. I mean, the government, if it will be SPD, CDU, CSU, it will just have a very small majority. And the wider world is not conducive for our agenda. It will be very, very difficult for the government's agenda. It will be very difficult. And Nadine said it a minute ago very adequately to form it through. I think I'll be honest with our viewers, I'm in favor of the Brandmauer, because to break out the walls and have it collapse would just normalize this party. This is not a normal party. That's a hard right party in a country with a certain history. We should not forget it. It's a difficult situation on the local level, but not on the national level. It's very difficult. I just want to remind our viewers, now we have a third of the Bundestag are parties that disagree with the Western course so far. Now they have a collaborator in the White House on the stance towards Ukraine. They are pro-Putin, they are pro-Russia, they're anti-NATO. Though this is difficult to begin with, and this has an impact I'm very much worried about, how to contain these strong corrosive effects on formulating a coherent policy.
Yeah, and I think there will be we can already see it in Eastern Germany. We had the regional elections in the Länder Saxony, Brandenburg, and Thuringia last year in September. We already talked about this. And what we saw there is that it was impossible for the established parties to form a coalition because there was not they could not reach over 50%. So we see in Saxony, we have a coalition of CDU and SPD, and they are lacking 10 votes within the parliament to have a majority. We see an unstable or, potentially unstable coalition in Thuringia with the CDU, SPD, and the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. And the fate of the party Sarah Wagenknecht is completely unknown as they are not part of the Bundestag anymore. So the perspective that they might maybe crumble within the next years, implode, it's also quite possible. And then also to have a look into the future, into the near future. In September 2026, we will have regional elections in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, the land in the Bundesland in the northeast of Germany, and also in Saxony-Anhalt, which is also in the former eastern part. And there we saw right now a huge dominance of the AfD. And honestly, I don't have an idea. If we have 40% AfD there, what's going to happen then? So the possibility that they might even have a majority in the parliament to govern alone is not, well, it's not too likely, but it's not impossible. So it will be huge. Well, it will be very difficult for the CDU in Sachsen-Anhalt to recover and to reconquer all those votes.
I mean, that comes back to what Klaus-Dieter was talking about the new government delivering. And I have a question for both of you about that. But before I ask that question, someone just submitted a question regarding whether or not Friedrich Merz will be able to get his 200 billion Sondervermögen through the current Bundestag. Do either of you think that that is a possibility?
Well, if he pursues this with energy and conviction, I think it's possible, if not likely, but he will be reminded constantly by those, the Greens, who now will be in the opposition soon, and the FDP, but particularly by from the Greens and from the Social Democrats. We told you so, Guy. We told you. And now, all of a sudden, you come around, discover, well, I need a couple of billion euros, a couple of billions, I mean 200, and this will not be the end. And then all of a sudden, it is possible what you denied a couple of weeks ago and called, well, the gravest sin in fiscal policy. Well, again, I mentioned the word credibility at the beginning of our program, and this will come to haunt him. This is the weakness. Is it possible politically? Yes, it is. Is it maybe a must? I would think in terms when we speak about the program for the Bundeswehr, die Kriegsfähigkeit, die Kriegstüchtigkeit, Verteidigungsfähigkeit. We get ready to defend ourselves and our partners in Europe. It's a must. It's when there are economists out there that say we may need our money at probably 150 billion euros per anno, per year. Now imagine 150, because what we are lacking and what we must probably procure in order to defend us and Europe, our partners in Europe, and given the situation, are the bleak situation currently with the United States.
Maybe it will be, well, I don't know, if it will be in the old Bundestag or in the new Bundestag. I think it's possible, but maybe it also comes with a price, because when other parties help the coalition to get the Sondervermögen, we need 2/3 of the parliament, so we need other parties in there. So there might be also a Sondervermögen, maybe for infrastructure, for education, or for something. Maybe we need to shift that as well. But right now, maybe there's like one person who might help Friedrich Merz. This is Boris Pistorius. He's the defense minister in the now in the government, and he is a social democrat, and he's also very interested in having enough money for the army and for the Bundeswehr. So, well, I think it's possible, but if he does it with the old Bundestag, I think it will be a moment of shame for him that he didn't do it before the election day.
So as we sort of start to come to an end, I think that this is great in the way in which you've mentioned a couple of the personalities of the new government, because it seems as if the Social Democrats are rethinking their personnel. Obviously, on the part of the Greens and in the Free Democrats, there have been some personnel changes. It's clear that Olaf Scholz will be a backbencher. He's not going to participate in the coalition negotiations. People like Boris Pistorius are likely to take on leadership roles in this new government together with Friedrich Merz. What can this new government of Christian Democrats and Social Democrats do to really shore up the political middle to address some of the concerns that we've talked about when it comes to the rise of the AfD, but also the future of the BSW, again, not represented in the Bundestag, but in government at the state level, in Brandenburg, in Thuringia, and elsewhere, the rise of the left party, which came as a surprise to a lot of people, this seems to be a time of action for the new government. I think it's hard to call it a große Koalition, but it is a coalition
It's a
of Christian Democrats. It's a
smallish.
small GroKo, but a coalition of Christian Democrats and Social Democrats. What do each of you think that they can do to really shore up the middle and bring back some of those voters?
Well, I would think the list of issues that they need to address is depressingly long, actually. The challenges are fundamental. I would think Friedrich Merz should do, and I hope he will, not because I say it, but I think it's not, address a few things head on. Are improve by whatever means the competitiveness of the German economy. And saying this, I know that there might be the imposition of new tariffs from the United States, which will be a major blow to the German economy, maybe a major external blow to the economy. So economic, as fast as possible, address the migration thing as fast as possible, and make this not a partisan thing, make this a collaborative thing of the government, and then address the shortcomings of the Bundeswehr and provide leadership in Europe. Help to or see that Europe is strong and coherent together. Someone said the other day, I guess it was Friedrich Merz, or no, it was something else. The French said it. Europe is waiting for you guys in Germany. You haven't been here with us for a couple of years now. Now it's maybe a minute before 12. You guys need to you rise to the occasion. You must be up to the task. You are the country in the middle of Europe, the largest, in terms of economy, in terms of population. We need you, and we cannot waste time anymore. And I hope the sense of urgency drives both Social Democrats and Christian Democrats together to agree on an agenda, prioritize it in the way I suggested, and think it would be a good one, and then move forward forcefully, if this is possible. With all the things that Nadine said a few minutes ago about the obstacles, the Schiller and Charybdis thing, that's all true. That's all true. It will not go away. But still, we need to have priorities.
Yeah, the problem is, I think the problem is a bit the structure. I think that a lot of people who voted now for AfD, they want to have quick fixes. They want to have higher rents, higher wages, and less asylum seekers. And I think all those three things can't, they won't be there like overnight. So I think it's important, at least in the asylum and migration politics, to show that the state is in control of the events. I think this is like one point that was really like hurtful to see also in the events of Aschaffenburg, that we could not like protect even a group of kindergartners or like peaceful demonstrators at the Union March. So I think we have to see this, and I think, or at least I hope, that the SPD comes to some migration and asylum politics where you focus on the functioning of the state, where you focus on having like quick procedures and quick decisions of whether a person is allowed to stay here or not, and if the person is not allowed to stay here, to organize like quickly the travel back to the home country or to some other country. So I think there's like, I would see, at least for the progressive parties, I would see like some space in that focus on the functioning, not like on stricter laws, because even now we are struggling in fulfilling our own laws in the migration and asylum politics. I think we have to also invest a lot in the Verwaltung. Sorry, I'm lacking that word.
In the administration. I mean, I think that's one of the that's one of Friedrich Merz's big points too, tying it back into what Klaus-Dieter said about increasing competitiveness, a decrease in bureaucracy to make it easier for business, right? And so the public administration piece of this is very important for the next government as well. Obviously, lots to talk about, and I feel as though we're just sort of skimming the tip of the iceberg here. I wish we had more time, but this has been a terrific discussion. A big thanks to both of you, and we will have to do it again in the not too distant future, because obviously there will be a lot to talk about as the coalition negotiations proceed. The hope is that a new government will form, or that the negotiations will be completed by Easter, and that a new government will form shortly after that. I'm not so optimistic. I think it might take a while to find the common denominator between the two parties, but obviously a lot for us all to watch in the meantime. So thank you for sharing your insights with both of us. Herzlichen Dank, Nadine, and vielen Dank, Klaus-Dieter.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.